that I can't go on, not in this way. I'm a dream that died by light of day. Gonna hold up high, the sky and say, only I own it. And I feel my heart beating. I feel my heart underneath my skin. Oh, I can feel my heart beating. 'Cause you make me feel like I'm alive again. Alive again. Oh, you make me feel like I'm alive again. Turn your magic on, and you should say everything you want to dream away. Under this pressure, under this weight, we are diamonds.
Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to another Hacking HR event. I'm your moderator for today, Soni Tawari, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you for this incredibly interesting and important topic as we begin this June series focused on career development and job search. If you can, give us a hello. Let us know where you're located. We'd love to see where participants are connecting to us from. We've got a distinguished panel with varied backgrounds and some really thought-provoking topics to discuss today. As always, we want this to be interactive and engaging, so please share your comments in the chat and we'll be regularly checking them. If we could now bring our panelists onto the stage. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Really excited to have this conversation. It's such an important topic. This whole series this month is fantastic. And everyone here, I know, has a lot of experience on both sides of the interview process. So I think it's going to be really awesome for our audience today. Let's do this. Let's start. I'll start with Jennifer, and then I'll move clockwise. And if you could provide your name, and maybe you could kick us off with this first question. What's, in your mind, a popular misconception people have about the interview process? And Jennifer, I'll give you just a second to collect your thoughts. Again, everyone, if you can say hello and let us know where you're joining from. And also, if you've got thoughts on that yourself, do leave that in the comments. Let us know what you think a popular misconception is as it relates to the interview process. But Jennifer, I'll pass it to you now.
Hello, I'm Jennifer. Love going first. I can't remember all the questions, but I've been in HR for around 10 years. I'm the director of people at a company called Jackbox Games. We make party games. Misconceptions around the interview process, there's so many. I think one for me when I was going through it, thinking back, was just that everything was going to be so traditional and conventional, and just like people just being a whole panel staring at you, asking you questions, just waiting for you to answer. Like, you know, this is what I feel like they're looking like, just waiting for you. And so you'd walk in just being so scared and unaware of what was going to happen. So I guess just that it's going to be a terrifying experience. Just going in already anxious and scared about how it's going to go down.
I love that. There's an element where interviews can actually be enjoyable, I guess. Right?
I try to make them anyway enjoyable.
I love that. Thank you for that intro. And thank you also for going first. I know I put you on the spot there, but you delivered wonderfully. I want to make sure I'm getting the name pronunciation correct. Is it Tanal?
Yeah, it's Tanal. Glad to be here. So I'm Tanal Basma. I'm an HR consultant with over 10 years experience as well. I've been a trusted advisor, coach, across different life cycles of the business, and always optimizing for the employee experience. The one thing that I find to be a misconception is that people think you're going into the interview to get hired. I find that from my perspective, you're the one who should be also interviewing the organization. So that's one misconception, is people get nervous because they're going in to be hired. I've interviewed, I would say, hundreds of candidates, and they always come in nervous and agitated, and I try to put them at ease to say that this is a mutual conversation. And I'm glad to say I've got feedback that I make HR cool, so something is working.
I love that. That's something that we should take a few minutes and discuss a little bit more in our conversation today. This idea of what you as the interviewee should be looking for when you're in that interview process. Because you're right, it's not just about presenting yourself as a great candidate. It's about understanding whether this organization is a good fit for you. So I love that you have surfaced that for today. Let's go to the next. Again, pronunciation, my apologies if I've got it wrong here. Shola?
No, that's actually good. Hi, I'm Shola. And I've been in HR and recruiting for close to 20 years, worked with startups and small growing companies. I also teach recruiting and onboarding at UC Berkeley Extension. I'm happy to be here with this panel. This is a topic that I love, and it's near and dear to me. I would say one of the popular misconceptions that I think people sometimes think going into interviews is they have to have all the right answers. I think it's really okay to not know everything or have an answer to every single question. It is okay to say, I'm actually not sure, but it would be something I would look into or can get back to you on. So 100% it's okay to not know every single thing in the interview process. I
love that. I can think of my own experience at times when I've been asked an interview question and I try to hit a home run and instead I strike out really badly, and it would be much better to take your advice on that one. So a good tip there, and we'll keep moving right along. I think Deepti.
Thanks, Sony. This is Deepti Lewis, all the way from India. I am the HR director at Conviva, been in HR for over 20 years. One of the misconceptions, I think, is people who are interviewing believe that it's a process where organizations are screening them out rather than screening them in. So they already feel a fear of failure even before they've started the conversation. And in a tech industry that I'm in, we're desperate for talent. So we're leaning in every time we interview someone, hoping that they'll be the right match. So not coming in with a sense of doom and gloom, but really enjoying the process is important.
Excellent. And I think that has some similarities to a bit of the sentiment that Jennifer shared as well. Really important. And our last introduction for the panel, Václav? Václav. Sorry about that. My apologies.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest misconception is that when people apply for a job, they think that at the other end, there is someone that really cares for them, But I think the opposite is true. The people who deal with the applications are mostly just trying to fill the vacant spot on the map, and just trying to fulfill their KPIs, and that's why all this ghosting happens, and they never close the loop with you, and you're wondering, sometime it's going well, and then suddenly it's going bad, and you don't know why. So that's my take on that.
That is really, it's a harsh truth, but there is truth to that, I think. Let's dive into that a little bit more. We want this to be a kind of free-flowing conversation. We've got some topics in mind, but let's follow the direction of where things take us. Let's talk about that a little bit more, because I think part of navigating the interview process is also about maintaining your own mental health and your wellness. And that can be challenging in a process, as you said, Václav, where the person on the other side doesn't really know you. They don't care about you like your partner or like your parents. So, and I think being under the microscope interview process, from your resume to a screen to a panel, and I think also the asymmetry that exists in the amount of information that you have versus the amount of information the organization has can be really stressful. So what advice would you have for someone to keep their mind in a healthy place through the interview process?
I would say, if I'm the one who should continue, take it as a game. Don't take it as a make or break situation or something. No one interview is going to change your life. Maybe some, but most of them won't. And take it as a game, as a learning opportunity, and approach it with an open mind. And if this one doesn't go well, maybe the next will be it.
That's how I think about moderating these panels. So probably some good advice there. Interesting.
I think you're doing it very well.
Well, we're 9 minutes in and it's still going, so that's something. But that's an interesting perspective. Rest of the panel, thoughts here?
Yeah, I can jump in. I want to agree that the interview should be a learning process, right? It's almost like a sales number. So similar to what Václav said, the recruiter is the one who's going through your resume, and recruiting is a lot like sales. They're trying to hit their numbers. They're trying to close. They're looking for key things in the resume, in your profile. They're not really as versed in the role as maybe the hiring manager. So thinking it from that perspective and making it easy for them to connect the dots, I think, is one of the things you think about when you're going into the interview.
Awesome.
I'd like to add another point, which is find your allies. It is going to be a tough journey while you're going through multiple rejections or ghosting, people not even picking up your resume. It's always good to have people who'll give you an honest answer in terms of, does my resume really fit the role that I'm applying? Am I putting too many things out there that nobody feels that I'm specialized in something? Am I truly fine-tuning my profile for a job that will work for me? Is there something that I can do differently? And be honest about how the interview process has gone for you. Which are the areas that you didn't really answer well? And probably that's a lesson for you to take back and introspect. But have people that you can bounce it off with. Otherwise, just keeping it in your mind can bog you down.
I want to add in keeping perspective. I remember last time I went through this, I was going through a career change. So that adds a whole other level of excitement, right? You're going through this whole process. And I remember being upset by a rejection email, and it got more confused with my ego than whether it was a job I actually had wanted in the first place. So keeping perspective on what are jobs that are actually ones that are going to be a good fit for you versus just kind of getting caught up in the excitement of going through interviews and then kind of falling too hard when you get the rejection for a job that might not have been something you wanted in the first place.
Good point.
I love how you, go ahead, Shola.
I mean, everyone said it so beautifully, but I think the learning and not being able to take it personally. I know that for some people, they've been looking for a very long time, and it's very hard to separate that. But there's a lot of quotes out there to not associate your job with your worth and your self-worth. And so just keeping that in mind, that it's not personal. The rejections are not personal. There's nothing wrong with you. And that next opportunity could be the one that is perfect for you.
Absolutely. I think that resonates with what Jennifer was saying as well. And Jennifer, I loved how you talked about this time when you had an interview process and you had a bit of a career pivot. And the language you just used is you said it was exciting. And I think that's really interesting because I know if I was in that situation, I might use a different adjective like terrifying. And I think that goes right to that lens, having the proper lens. We've got a couple of comments here, I think, just to put into the pot. And thank you everyone for saying hello. And we've got a really awesome engagement, really distributed audience from across the globe today. So we're just so fortunate you're here. But one LinkedIn user, highlighted this idea that the experience is not really mutual. And that's what we were saying before, it's asymmetrical in terms of your role versus the organization. They talked about following up. They said, they talked about ghosting. And they said, besides sending a thank you email, how can you gently follow up? What are your thoughts on following up and navigating that with respect for the fact that a lot of employers are not going to engage with you after an interview if they don't want to move forward?
Yeah.
Let me
Go ahead. Some thoughts there. It is a mutual interaction, but there's also numbers that are involved, right? So we talked about recruiters trying to hit their numbers. Somebody mentioned finding your allies. So finding your allies inside the organization is going to help. As a recruiter or hiring manager myself, I usually will give credence to people that have known for a longer time or, have come in through a referral. So knowing somebody within the organization that can vouch for you, that helps, boost up your own credibility. It's almost like social credit, right? And even if it's not somebody within the organization, make friends with recruiters when you don't need a job. This way, when you do need a job, you already have a rapport. They already know the value that you're bringing.
Dropping nuggets right here. These nuggets of information. Fantastic, Tanal. Thank you. Anyone else want to touch on this?
I just wanted to say, I think in terms of following up, I think it makes sense maybe to send one thank you email. And if there's anything you missed or you forgot to say in the interview, you probably can try to put it in an email and send it to the recruiter or to the hiring manager. But apart from that, there's not much sense in following up. I know there is advice available on the internet and YouTube and everywhere, and people say like, yeah, follow up every day, send an email, and that make you stand out from the crowd, and they will remember you. Yes, they will most probably remember you, but I would say not in the best light, at least from my point of view, because an average employee, and me included, receives about 100 to 120 emails per day. That's the statistics. And then you get one more from a candidate who is probably like number 3 or 4 or 5 on your list. And then, what does it do? Most probably you will unconsciously just move them to the bottom of the pile, right? Because they're just adding to your burden of your everyday communication load, which you have to process. So, I mean, if I say I will let you know by the end of the next week, it means I don't want to hear from you by the end of the next week, and that's it.
I do have some thoughts on that. Yes, I do agree that if there's a lot of things happening, but following up is a two-way street. If I'm busy, I also want you to follow up with me by the end of next week. So I don't want you to send me an email every 5 minutes, but it does help if you have it in a staggered manner and you kind of come back and say, hey, I'm just, refreshing this to the top of your inbox. Again, it's the best if you can connect the dots. So before you can even follow up, you need to know what value you're bringing, what problem the role is solving, and then, try to connect the dots for me, because I have a lot of emails that I'm going through. And so the easier you make it on me, the more likely I am going to have a follow-up call with you.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've got a diverse panel here, so we're also going to have diverse perspectives, and that's something I think we all should keep in mind, that as individuals that may run a hiring process or interview process, we're not a monolith. So you're going to have, it's going to be different things needed for different circumstances. With that said, I think everyone might have a slightly different perspective here, but it could be interesting for our participants here to hear what you look for in a candidate. Of Of course, it's going to be very different depending on the discipline and the needs of a particular team. But maybe we could split it out by what you would look for generally for someone in an early career role versus a manager role versus a leadership role, because we've got participants that are watching that may be in those different areas, different parts of their own career journey. So as someone that conducts an interview, what are some general things that you look for that might be different depending on the level?
One of the things that I look at is attitude. You might have the technical skills, and sometimes technical skills, even if you don't have it, there are training programs available. But the attitude that you exhibit during a conversation is extremely important, and bringing about examples that show your teamwork, your resilience, your learning abilities. Those are things that strike me the most when I'm having those conversations. And it doesn't matter whether you're in your entry level or you are in mid-management or you're in leadership. It's how you treat yourself, how you treat people around you, and how you lead people. And all of that comes from the attitude that you're exhibiting.
I agree with Deepti. I think it's regardless of level of position. Some of the general things I look for is the candidate's ability to provide an example of how they've dealt with a situation that we're looking for them specifically for the role, and also the learning. And so a lot of people may have heard of the STAR method, where you talk about and you answer questions in the format of a situation. What did you do? What was the result? But I like to add an L at the end of the STAR method, and it's the learning. And I think regardless of where you are in your career, whether you're entry level or management or even executive level, you should be able to speak to some kind of specific example that you faced, whether it was in school, whether it was in one of your roles that you've had, or several roles or career. And also, what did you learn from it? And how are you going to take that learning and apply it to the role that you're applying for and interviewing for?
We've just expanded the STAR acronym. It's STARL now. So I can remember that, STARL. Thank you for that, Shola. I've got a follow-up to that, but I'll wait to see first if the rest of anyone else on the panel has got thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I want to, I guess, third that about being able to relate your experience to the questions. And to reiterate, that doesn't mean that you've done the exact same thing at a different organization. It means you can take that skill and extrapolate it from anything that you've done and talk through the skill in that specific situation. So again, it doesn't matter where you are in terms of the entry level versus manager versus leader. It doesn't have to be that exact lineup. It just has to be extracting that skill from something. And that could be even a project in school, and then how you learn through that. But what I wanted to add to that is I'm looking for candidates that want to learn about our company in terms of our culture to see if it's the place for them, because to reiterate, skills can be taught. We can get some classes, we can teach you those skills, but finding a place where the culture values line up is really important. So a candidate wants to learn about that, wants to engage a conversation about that, and learn about that from both sides really stands out to me.
Yeah.
So on this point of using the STARL method, one of the challenges, I've experienced this on both sides as someone that's being interviewed and someone that's trying to conduct an interview, is navigating how much time to lean in, how much time to spend on a topic, and finding the right balance between going too long or going too short. I don't know about you. I've been in an interview where I asked a question and the person answered the question and talked about it for 25 minutes. And that was the interview. And I've also been on the other side of that. I don't know if I've gone 25 minutes, but I've definitely gone on a topic and then the person's like, okay, so, because I talked way too long. So what advice do you have to try to find that sweet spot?
I have, in my experience, I'd rather you give me the R first. Don't start with the situation, flip that acronym, start with the result. What impact did you make? Then we'll get ready to dive into the details. So that's how I look at it. And if you can put in a mix of soft skills and technical skills, that increases, your ranking in my eyes. So it's not just about teamwork, but do you need teamwork? Are you like a team player, or are you a team leader? So going back to different levels in the organization. If you're in a junior category, I'm going to be a lot more forgiving if you don't have leadership capabilities, and those are things that you can develop. But if you are going to be leading a function, I expect you to have some business acumen. I expect you to have researched the organization and the industry, and be able to hold a strategic conversation during the interview. So it's going to be different, different based on the needs of the role, and again, the life cycle that we are in within the organization, what things that we're looking for that particular role. Learning agility is definitely number one. Like, things change so fast nowadays. You have to be able to show that you're willing to learn, no matter where you've been or what experience you've had.
One of the things that I always tell friends, family, anyone that I'm talking to about interviewing prep, one of the biggest things is practicing. We all get nervous, no matter how long you've been interviewing in your career. You get nervous, and sometimes when we get nervous, we either talk too little and can't, speak to our accomplishments or achievements, or we tend to just ramble on. And so being able to practice is so important. So find the few examples that you have, whether it's through school or through your work experience, that relate to the job and what they're looking for, and actually practice some of those responses. So whether you use the whole STAR and learning response, or some version of it, practice it and make sure that you're speaking to probably no more than 5 minutes. And it will help you practice be more concise in your answers. You'll be able to share so much more about your experience and your accomplishments if you keep your answers short and be able to provide more examples throughout a 20-30 minute conversation.
Go ahead.
Yes, I would just probably interject very shortly. I think it's a very good advice. If you should be prepared, and you should know interview is a sort of it's sort of a game by itself, right? And every game has the rules, and you should know the interview typically lasts about 60 minutes. So if you get asked questions, you should probably keep your answers within maybe 3 to 5 minutes. Being it STAR questions, or being it any other questions like tell me about yourself or summarize your CV, all these typical ones. Prepare 3 to 5 minute short stories, and that's the best way how to answer them.
And another point, in case you're not prepared for a particular question and you're expected to answer, and you do have and you come up with a situation, you can give a gist of it and then ask the interviewer, do you want me to delve a little deeper into this? Is there a particular area you'd like me to focus on? So you're asking the interviewer to guide the conversation, so you know what you have to deliver, and that gives you some room to think about it as well and prepare your response.
Man, I gotta use that one. That's a good one. And I gotta start using the stopwatch here, the clock, make sure I'm not taking too long to pivot. We've got some really good comments here, and I'll share them in a second, but I just want to queue up the next question, and then I'll get to some comments from the audience. In terms of, do you have a perspective on a structured versus an unstructured interview, either your preference as an interviewer, or how you might navigate a structured versus an unstructured interview? Is there's any differences on the interviewee side of things? I'll queue that question up, give you a moment just to think about that. But some really great comments. Just had a LinkedIn user provide this quote: "Your attitude affects your altitude." Love that. We've already got people talking about the STAR method, so I think that's catching on, Shola. we had a comment here a few minutes ago. Someone asked, what if you don't have allies within the particular organization? As we were talking about that previously, we have a session later this month that's on networking, because I think thinking about the interview process holistically, it's not just about what happens in a conversation or applying for a particular role, but it's all the things you do, as someone I think on the panel mentioned, the connections that you're making with recruiters even when you're not searching for a job, right? So probably don't have a lot of time to get into the networking topic, but we do have a session coming up later this month on that. So you can check that out. I would highly recommend it. So coming back to the question about structured versus unstructured interviews panel, what are your thoughts there on both sides of the table?
I can jump in. I highly prefer structured. I think it really helps minimize bias and provides a consistent experience for all the candidates, especially when you're interviewing several candidates for one role. So I would advocate 100% for structured interviews. What I think sometimes gets lost, though, in structured interviews is it's okay to still ask probing questions. So you have a set of questions that you'll ask of each candidate, and it's okay to go a little bit deeper and probe in some of the answers they give. So it doesn't remove the ability to have the flow of the conversation throughout the interview. It just provides a little bit more consistency across candidates that you're interviewing.
I fall somewhere in the middle, but it might be a little bit, just a little more lenient than where you're at, where I have a certain set of questions that I think that I need to ask each candidate, again, to make sure that there's some, I'm reducing bias as much as possible, but I do want to allow time for conversation. So I think when I first started recruiting, I had, for say a 30-minute HR interview, maybe like 10 questions. Now I have 3 or 4, and I try to allow the time in between for time to kind of veer off and get a little more conversational, get to know the person a little bit better, more opportunities for connection before I go on to that next specific question.
Yeah. So ideally we want structured interviews, but I find that if it's too structured, you kind of miss certain key points. I like to make it more conversational. I also like to get the interviewee a little bit more comfortable. So I go back to questions like, what did you want to be when you were, a 6-year-old? I find that takes them off guard. All the prepared, questions go off the window, but it also puts them at ease. So that opens up a window for, I would say, questions that line up with a scorecard. So I don't have the exact questions that I need to ask, but I do have a scorecard of what am I looking for. And if their answers kind of line up with the skill sets and the soft skills that I'm looking for, it increases their ranking. So it's semi-structured, I would say. I find that if you have it too structured, it just loses its oomph for me. You can get a lot of out of the box answers that really don't give you the answer you want.
Yeah, I do agree to allow, while you have your set of questions, to also allow for the conversation to flow and pick up things that the interviewee is saying and build on that further. It may not result in your checking off your scorecard, but it does give you an insight into the person and their personality as well. So somewhere in the middle is where I'd land.
Yeah, finding that balance is important. And Tanal, on your point about structured interviews, I certainly love them. I find that other hiring managers that are not in HR or in recruiting might not love them as much. We've got a lot of inherent biases about our ability to evaluate people, and I think some organizations, some teams are moving beyond that conversation a little quicker than others. So that's a topic. That's a whole other topic, probably how to get your organization to buy into structured interviews. But we got another LinkedIn user comment I thought was really applicable to a lot of what we're talking about. They said a job interview isn't a test of a candidate's knowledge, but the ability to use it at the right time. That is really well said. Very, very cool. Let's talk about something else. Going back to, I think Tanal, you had made this point in your intro about understanding whether the organization is a good fit for you. So it's a two-pronged question. One is, what are the things that you're researching? What are the things a candidate should be researching about our organization? Because we all do that. We Google the company, we go on LinkedIn, we go on different platforms, we go on maybe a Glassdoor. We look around and we look for things that might be helpful for us in terms of answering the interview questions. But then to your point also, Tanal, about also understanding whether this company is a good fit. So panel, what are your thoughts about the information that's going to be really key to not only succeed in the interview, but also to succeed in assessing fit?
So I have, last year we were doing a performance review, and my CEO was like, we need to do a 9-box interview. We need all A players in the organization. We cannot afford to have anybody that's not an A player. And I'm like, well, an A player in X organization could be a C player in your organization. So how do you define that? And this is what I challenge everybody to look at is, what is non-negotiable for you? Who are you at your best? And what environment do you need to thrive? So when you're looking at an organization, that's what you want to look for. Is there a growth opportunity? Do you want a growth opportunity? Do you prefer autonomy? Do you prefer teamwork? What are the things that you are not, non-negotiable on? And what are some things you can make concessions on? And then you look through the Glassdoor ratings. You look through the leadership team, like what is their philosophy? What is their EVP? What's the value that they bring for you as a team member? Those are the things that you want to look for. And do they align with what you need to be at your best? It's not always going to be 100%, but the higher, if it's 60%, go for it. You have your own threshold that you need to grow into. Does that make sense? Do you want me to go more into the details?
Ooh, that sounded like what Deepti's advice was, to ask that question to get more time, but I don't think you needed it. No, I think that was a great answer from an A player on this panel, whatever A player means, because nobody has ever really defined it well for me. They just keep pointing me to that book from Netflix. But panel, other thoughts on this topic in terms of what are things to look for when you're researching a company?
Deepti, it looks like you're going to say something, so I'll wait and let you go.
Sure. One of the things I've seen a lot of work done on career sites for companies. It's just not about going through the leadership and looking at their backgrounds. It's also a lot of insight into the culture of organizations and some really fantastic blogs that are out there about organizations. So taking that extra step to delve a little bit deeper, while yes, you might understand the product, the area of business, the domain, what does it take to be a part of that organization? And do I have it in me to be a part of that organization? I think some of these additional pieces do provide that insight. So to take the time and do your research, and just don't throw a dart anywhere that you choose. Think about where you want to be and what kind of organizations you'd like to be in, and really focus on their culture, the attitude, the attributes that they're looking for, and then make the decision.
I agree with everything that's been said. I would just add that, everything that you find in your research before you're interviewing with a company, remember it's one side of the story. Just when you're interviewing as a candidate, the company is seeing one side of you through the interview process. I would say through all that research, whether, Glassdoor, their website, value proposition, blogs, even if they're a product company, look at some of the social media channels, look at some of the review on the products or their customer service. And really, it's about bringing what you find and asking some questions to dig deeper during the interview process. So when it's your turn to ask questions about the company, make sure to bring in what you found. And especially if there's a gap in what you found, or if there's a discrepancy in what you found, it's an opportunity to ask. One of my favorite questions to ask, I think, of a company is, sometimes companies have a list of values on their website. one of the best questions to ask is, can you tell me about how, one or more of your values are lived out, or how they've been lived out in the last, month? That really speaks to the fact of, are they truly living out their values, or is it a marketing ploy, sharing their list of values? So that's one that I'd love. You'll get a lot from that answer.
I would add, probably you can even ask them if they remember the values, because I feel most of the time it's just marketing, and that's the downside if you do the research as just a normal person, let's say from the street, right? Either you find the information that is maybe sometimes even obsolete, because surprisingly, even big organizations don't always update their websites properly. And second, you find a lot of information that is inflated for marketing reasons, and the companies are trying to look bigger and better and wealthier and whatever not. I think I would advise three things to the job seekers, how they can improve their position. And one is work with a reputable recruitment consultancy. It's probably just good for a number of professions, because in certain areas and professions, recruiting happens mainly through agencies, especially if it comes to niche skills. And these recruitment consultancy companies can actually help you and guide you, and they should really know their client, and they should be able to explain to you what the company is really about. Second, you can work with a career coach who can help you to decode, let's say, the language, because there are certain clues you have to be aware of, like if the company says, oh, we are a happy tribe, or we work hard, play hard, and there are many others, and you should know what is actually behind this, and how to avoid being trapped in a job that will maybe sometimes disappoint you, or maybe sometimes even stress you, and sometimes it can even cause you health issues. So
I love that idea of decoding. Yes, just to add a few quick things onto that. Just to, I guess, reiterate also what I said before. I used to work for a company where you couldn't find anything about the company online, which was a nice, fun hurdle for us trying to get candidates. But once we had candidates, I absolutely expected that they would have conversations about what we did in our culture. And I think going back to what someone else said about understanding what's important to you and have those questions ready to ask. And something that I've been asked and I've asked before that I think works quite well is to ask, what is unique about your culture, or what is something about, your culture that only the employees at your company would relate to and understand. And that can give a little bit of, even further than culture, like a little bit of the personality of the company.
I love that, trying to get to something that differentiates that organization, and also whether the person on the other side of the conversation has taken the time to understand what that is. So really powerful stuff. So let's pivot to the topic of panel versus screening interviews. Is there anything, I think this was touched on lightly earlier in our conversation, but maybe we could expand this topic. Is there anything I should be thinking about as an interviewee differently in terms of what I'm trying to accomplish in that screening call versus with one person versus a panel interview later in the process with a group of individuals? What are either some do's or some don'ts, or just some perspective we should keep in mind to make that really successful?
I would say on a screening call, they're typically going to be shorter in nature. So you have a very short window of time to communicate your achievements, your accomplishments, and how what value you're going to bring into the company and the role. So I would say with that one, it's so important to really have your answers be concise and make sure that the examples you're providing are clear-cut, connected to the position that you're interviewing for and they're screening you for. Most of the time as well, I would say, I mean, at least for in my career, the screening call also includes the opportunity to assess someone's communication skills. So it's really important that you're not only being concise in your answers, but also listening. You can tell if someone is listening to what's being asked. And so I think that communication is going to be really an important skill that's going to be assessed in the screening call. With the panels, if you have more than one person that you're being interviewed, it's typically going to be longer. My recommendation there is just make sure that you're communicating, again, eye contact and questions and responses to both, to however many people are on the panel. You want to be able to engage with all of them.
Yeah, it's tough when you're in a panel because you're going to have different personalities there and different people from various functions, especially in a leadership role. Some of them are going to be very numbers driven, some of them are more storytelling. So the more you can combine those two, the better chances you have at landing. So practice your stories, figure out like what is it that you're really good at, create a story around it and be able to tell that at the time of the interview, especially in the panel. Also be cautious of your body language. You know, sometimes, you know, because you might be nervous, you might be closed in or hunched over. So be conscious of those things when you are in a panel. Sometimes those panels could go on for hours. So make sure you had good rest, you're well fed, you're well, you know, you drank your water, or you even have a water bottle with you so that you stay hydrated. And don't be afraid to ask for a break. Like if you need to rejuvenate, you know, ask for time, you know, just go to the restroom and get a, you know, couple of minutes to refresh. The other thing that I like to say about Zoom is limit your clutter. Like, limit the clutter. I've seen people like, you know, interviewing in the bedroom and it's a mess. It just kind of makes me question, are they going to be, you know, organized? Are they going to be able to do the job if they can't clean their room? So make sure you're aware of your surroundings when you're on Zoom.
I like that bathroom idea, that we can connect that to Deepti's idea before about sometimes if you need an extra moment to answer a question, you know, I haven't tried that, but maybe I should sometime in the future. If someone asks me a question I have a hard time answering, I can take a bathroom break and then come back and try to answer it. No, all jokes aside, any other thoughts on this panel? I want to also I want to follow up and talk about remote versus in person.
I just had one thought. The number of errors that are seen in profiles in a screening conversation is quite a bit. So take the time to look at what you're writing. I've had many conversations with people trying to review their profile and say, this doesn't make sense. The dates don't match. What's happening? It looks like you worked in 3 companies at the same time. And they're like, oh, that's an error. So if you're not paying attention to details and you're looking at an opportunity that requires you to do that, you're not really getting any points for a resume that hasn't been reviewed.
Just to add something similar to that, make sure it's the most up-to-date resume. So if you sent your resume in a month before and you're finally getting to that HR screen or the interview screen, you know, just shoot over the most updated if something has changed in that month, so that when you're on the call, you're speaking to your most recent experience. And you don't have to keep saying, oh, that's my old resume. You know, you can really speak to what's up to date.
So panel, talking about the in-person versus virtual, I think we've pretty much normalized virtual interviews. It's, for a large portion of the workforce, it's the default mode of interviewing. What's something that you have to pay extra attention to in a virtual space, or have to pay extra attention to in an in-person interview? You could talk to both or just talk to one or the other.
Let me take that up because I landed up going off camera. This is what happens when there's a storm brewing outside and you lose your electricity. The challenge with remote interviews is the possibility of not being able to see the person's face. And sometimes you don't know whether the person you're speaking to is actually the person whose profile you're looking at. So that definitely becomes a challenge. I think the personality comes out a lot more in face-to-face. So I'm really biased towards having people come in person and have those conversations. Yeah.
I think Deepti is completely right. Whenever there's an online interview, you should always have a plan B in case your electricity goes off or your internet connection goes off, or anything like that. And then second, I think the most important point is never stand up before you're sure your camera is off. I think you know why.
Or at least be wearing pants, right? Make sure you're wearing pants if you do that.
If there's anything you need during the interview, be it a glass of water or tissues or whatever, have it at your hand, and don't ever have to stand up before the interview is over. We have seen many examples of this going wrong.
True.
I would just say, when you're interviewing in person, you want to give yourself enough time to get there, find parking, get settled in. It's the same thing with remote. I would say give yourself time to test your technology, your internet, get comfortable in your space, have everything that you need right at your fingertips. So just as much as you would give time to finding the place and parking and everything, give yourself still enough time with technology. Zoom is great, but don't come online, right at the time and not be prepared, and because things could break. Technology is what it is.
Also, as an interviewer, I understand that life happens. People might be on their lunch break or while they're running their kids someplace. But just make sure that where you actually have the interview, you can hear and be heard. And that's the most important part. So again, we know life happens, but just make sure that your technology works. Try to get in there a couple of minutes early to make sure everything's going smoothly before you actually have the interview.
So you have the interview, and how do you, as an interviewee, how do you reflect? How do you assess? I don't know about you. When I do an interview, usually I've got a gut instinct, like that felt really good or it felt terrible. So I guess, how do you do that reflection, that post-reflection? How does it feed into the next one? What does that process look like? What do you recommend?
If you mean as a candidate?
Yes.
As a candidate, I think it can be a little bit misleading, because you can have a great feeling after the interview, and even the panel can have a great feeling after the interview, but you will be probably one of out of 5 people that are being interviewed for that role, or even more, and you don't know how well the others did. So yeah, maybe you did well, but maybe there was someone else who did even better. And I advise to keep applying until you really have a signed contract in your hand. That's the safest way to go about this.
Yeah, it's hard for you to get feedback after the interview. Most places will not give you feedback. But if you can, you can always ask and say, hey, how did I do? What could I do better for the next interview? And then, having a coach to help you through that afterwards. They could help you see things that maybe you didn't see. And the last point I want to make is work with recruiters and recruiting agencies, because they have your best interest at heart. They are able to give you that feedback, and they'll be able to, get it for you if you can't get it directly.
It can be helpful to keep a running list of questions. So if you get a question you've never had before, and even if especially if it stumped you for a few minutes, you had to really, run to the bathroom to think about it or whatever, jot it down. Make sure that next time you get that question, you're ready for it.
Great idea there.
And another input, especially for tech conversations, where you're struggling to find the answer, for example, and you go back and you introspect and you think through the question, you come back with a response. It's good to let the organization know that, listen, I went back and I learned this and I realized that this is how you're supposed to do it. Because sometimes while you're doing it during the interview, your code doesn't compile. If you're actually typing it through, it just doesn't work. And then that shows that you're not letting go of a problem, that you have the willingness to really go back and learn and come back. And that helps you probably get the next opportunity to interview. If you don't show that, you probably won't be considered. So sometimes leaning in also helps. And then you also go back with a feeling that you've tried your best. And if it didn't work out, it didn't, but at least you didn't leave something unanswered. And that would really help the process as well.
I'd like to answer it a little bit differently, because what I heard was when someone walks away feeling really good after the interview, one of the things that I would highly recommend for everyone, and I don't see this as often as I used to when I first started in HR and recruiting years ago, but use that energy and follow up with a thank you email. Bring all that energy and excitement that you're feeling into a personalized thank you email, highlighting some of the things that you learned. What are the things that are really that you're really excited about? And then also use that opportunity if you did forget something, or if you wanted to expand on something that maybe you feel like you didn't delve into too deep, that you want to provide more context on, use that as an opportunity to include that as well there. I think it shows an extra, at least from an interviewer perspective, it shows your engagement, you're excited, you listened, you took away some notes, and just reminding us what value and impact you can have.
So we've got two quick hits if we can. If not, we'll just do one. But we've got an interesting comment from Carolyn in the chat. She asks, is it okay to take notes during a remote interview, or ask before the interview starts if it would be okay to jot down notes or look at your notes? My perspective is I think that's great, especially if you're just asking at the beginning of the interview. But want to check if anyone on the panel's got a different perspective on that.
Well, I think you can take notes in any interview, being remote or in present, and the other side will definitely take notes. So it's okay for the candidate to take notes, and you don't even have to ask. It's just, I think it even makes you look more professional if you take notes.
And okay. And anyone else on that one?
I concur. I think it's okay to take notes as long as you're keeping eye contact, frequent eye contact when you're talking. It's totally okay to, it helps. Some people are visual thinkers. Some people, when they take notes, will help crystallize their thoughts. So go for it.
So as we start to wind the panel down here, what is something that our audience, if they are in an interview process, what's something that they could understand about those of us that work in HR or recruiting? What's something they can understand about the way that we do our role in this process that could be helpful for them as the interviewee?
We are people too. We are working on this hard. We are probably a little bit stressed out getting through this process. So, have some grace with us. We'll have some grace with you. And, we're here to help too and support.
I would underline that. And just what you said, understand there are people on the other side as well, and show some appreciation and understanding for their pains. And I think that can help them to realize you are a person too, and not just a commodity, just another one of the 1,000 candidates that they have to process.
Like I said in the beginning, we are also leaning in when we have you in an interview, because we're also spending the time. So we would love to find that synergy, find that alignment, and get you on board. While yes, it checks off a box in terms of our numbers being met, but it's also going to be a great opportunity to work together. So we are leaning in, and you should also lean forward and have a conversation.
I would add, I 100% agree with we're humans, we're people too, but also we're just one part of the decision-making process. Usually there's several other people who are involved in looking at the screening notes, the resumes and other things as well. So we're one part of a bigger puzzle.
One more thing I'd add is that, we're looking at this also from your best interest. So a no could be something, that you're saving grace. You don't want to come into a role that you're not qualified for, will not excel your skills. So we're not just saying no because we want to say no. We're doing it for mutual benefit for the organization and yourself. So take it with grace and, make it a learning moment.
Bottom line, interviewing is hard on both sides of the table. And certainly if you haven't run an interview process, you don't really know all of the factors that you have to manage and the number of roles that usually an interviewer is working on at the same time. And like you said too, the limitations that the recruiter or HR has in their influence in the decision, but they don't have authority in the decision, but they do have some authority in the process, except for the myriad number of times when managers or leaders ask to make exceptions in the process. So it's quite a lot to manage. But panel, thank you so much today. You have, I think, shed some important light on a lot of critical aspects of navigating the interview process. And for those of you that work in HR, you probably could relate to a lot. Hopefully you took some notes. Notes were definitely allowed in this session. And again, for all of you that participated, that joined us from around the globe, thank you so much. Thank you, panelists. I certainly learned a lot. We've got more sessions throughout the rest of the month. The next one is on Thursday. It's entitled Building Your Community and Professional Network, How to Create and Nurture Meaningful Connections. I hope that you'll check that out. And you can visit the Hacking HR website or the LinkedIn profile for details on the rest of the sessions through June. Again, everyone here, thank you so much for attending. Thank you to Jessa and the Hacking HR team for continuing to usher these conversations. Hope you have a great day, great evening, great morning, wherever you are.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.